Yamina, can you tell us a little bit about your own story and the experiences that you've had as a breast cancer survivor?
Yes, I can. So back in 2013, I was 38 when I suddenly got the diagnosis of breast cancer, which was a huge shock because no one in our family had it. And then it's like what I call the cancer fast train, because within a week after the diagnosis, my breast was amputated. I was starting with chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And that went like really fast. It was really a tough and difficult treatment. I had chemo for like 24 weeks. But still, at the very beginning, when I knew that I was also going to lose my second breast, because I really had a really aggressive type of cancer, I went to see a plastic surgeon already, because I wanted to know how am I going to have two breasts again after all this shizzle. And so that's where I found out about deep flap surgery, where they use belly tissue. You know, they say fat tissue, but I say belly tissue, to make new breasts. But then I found out it cost like 5,000 euros, which wasn't reimbursed by the Belgian healthcare. So I organized a benefit for myself and my friends and family. We were able to raise this money like 3 weeks. And that inspired me to start a not-for-profit organization, Benetit, to do the same for other women in the same situation. But more importantly, I took it on myself to campaign with the Minister of Health, Magie de Blok, to try to convince her to make this surgery reimbursed. And after a year and a half of campaigning, we succeeded. So since 2017, no woman will have to pay for this surgery again in Belgium. So I was very proud with that, and I dissolved our not-for-profit association. And then we had funds left in our association. We gave it to the cancer research of Damia Laoui at the VUB, it's a university in Brussels. And they asked me to start up a foundation in my name. So now I have the VUB Yamina Crosse Foundation, where I took on the commitment to raise 400,000 euros for this cancer research. So this really, in a small time, the story of the last almost 10 years. That's the story of my life with breast cancer.
What a fantastic story. I mean, you've had great energy to take on the issues. Yeah. I guess not every woman or man who's diagnosed would have that kind of energy, but you had. I mean, what would you say to 38-year-olds who are diagnosed, or women in their 40s? Because I think people are still surprised that, you know, you can be quite young and have a diagnosis of breast cancer.
I was surprised, because I didn't see that coming at 38. It's true that it's really hard, but it's hard at any age, but also at a young age, of course. Which makes it more difficult is that oftentimes these young women will have young children, which makes everything a little bit harder. What I would always say is we are always willing to help other people, but we are really reluctant to ask for help. So that's the first thing I would say. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because people really want to help, and you will need help, because it's really a tough time to go through. So I think that's the first step. Yeah.
Apart from the treatment, which is obviously pivotal, what did you find the most useful kinds of support that you got?
Well, I noticed that during the time that I was sick, a lot of people were offering to help me, to bring some food or to do all kinds of stuff. But the mistake I think they made sometimes is call me first and ask, hey, we're making spaghetti, can we bring you some? And I always said, no, it's fine. So my suggestion is always to people who have someone in their network that is going through this disease, or any disease actually, is just not call, but just go. And just say, hey, I made some spaghetti sauce, this is for you, just use it. Because that's the hardest part, I think, to accept and ask for help.
Yes.
So the support is present, but you need to put it to work.
Access it. Yes. I mean, one of the areas I want to explore with you is the whole question of when you are say a breast cancer survivor or a patient. Tell me, about work, because your work life is interrupted.
Yes.
And can you go back to work? naive question in some ways, but what was your experience in relation to work? And also I want to ask you about caring responsibilities, which you mentioned.
Well, I remember that at first I thought, well, it's going to be a treatment of 24 weeks, so within the year I will go back to work. Because I'm someone who wants to go, so I wanted to go back to work. And then suddenly when you go through this treatment and and surgery and everything, you notice that after a year you're not at work, you're not back at work. So that's really frustrating if you're really willing to work. But I think the important thing is that you need to stay in contact with your employer or your colleagues. And I think that is a part responsibility for the employer to also stay connected with the patient. What I found difficult is that my energy level changed. I was tired quickly, often at the stress level. I reached it really quickly. So it was really, really hard. But when I was ready to go back to work, I noticed that in Belgium we have this progressive return to work. I don't know how you call it in English, but it's the possibility that you have to start working like 1 day a week, then 2 days a week.
Flexible work.
Yes, but it's not like a rule. It's like a possibility, and the employer needs to agree with it. So if we're talking about, is there any discrimination towards breast cancer patients or survivors, maybe it's a little bit that, because it depends on the employer whether you can do it or not. So what women and men are facing is that they want to go back to work, but then the employer says, well, you have to come back half-time or full-time. And sometimes in the beginning, half-time is just too much. So that's really a pity, because I remember when I had my breast reconstructive surgery, after, I don't know, 2 months, I felt really good. I didn't ask my doctor, I returned to work. And then I think a few weeks later, I crashed. I crashed. Yes. And my doctor said, well, who gave you permission to go back to work? And I said, well, I didn't know I had to ask for permission because I was feeling fine. But the problem is that when you're feeling fine, you don't have like the reserve of energy.
Yes.
You're at zero.
So it's about taking your time to build up your energy again.
Yes, you need to take the time, and that's really difficult if you are someone that really wants to go back to work. Yeah. You really need to understand that getting better is also work. I remember an onco-psychologist I saw when I was in treatment. She told me, when you're recovering, you really need to see it like work. It's like a full-time job. You have to walk in and do all the steps you need to do to get better. And that is resting, but that's also having a walk, go have tea with a friend, do a little sports, just slowly, and then build it up. And that's really a job as well. But yeah, I think people think I'm feeling better, so I'll go back to work. But so if it's too soon, then it's going to set you back and maybe leave you at home even longer.
There was a time not so long ago when people say who got a diagnosis of any cancers felt, including breast cancer, that's the end of my career. You know, there was whereas now I think we have a much more, if you like, integrated approach to understanding that it's time out.
Yeah.
But that requires employers to really understand and to have good policies around how they work with and deal with patients who are diagnosed or cancer survivors. So that's an area we need to do more work on, I think.
Yes, I think so too. I know in Belgium there are a lot of organizations that are doing really good work where they are advising employers about what they can do to help the employees to get back to work, to have like a special task or a special work timings of work, and they really help employers and employees to find a way to go back to work. Sometimes it can mean like something that is known as demotion, do maybe another type of job, something that is less stressful, less working days, and sometimes that's just a way to get back to it and then gradually maybe build it up, or maybe not, because we also hear that a lot of cancer patients after this treatment, after this whole debacle, sometimes they don't want to return to the same job. But as there are also many people who really want to go back to their jobs.
That's right. So it's trying to have the range of options for people and match it in with what they really want to do themselves. I mean, I think it's really important that the choice is there. But I think we've got a lot of information education work to do on that, you know, with employer organisations, with trade unions. And I want to ask you about the policies that you think will help in a moment. But just before I do, can we look at the care issue? Somebody said to me recently, very often people who are supporting cancer patients or survivors or other patients, they said, you know, they don't really see themselves as carers. And I thought that was very interesting because, you know, sometimes we think of caring as something to do with maybe older people or maybe care of children.
Yeah.
But when it comes to illness and, say, a diagnosis, which is, as you say, life-changing and very dramatic, can be very dramatic, usually is, the whole care situation. Tell us about your experience with both those who were caring, supporting you, and your own experience.
Well, I was a single mom when this happened to me, so I was really concerned about my children. And you want, of course, to give the same care as you used to do before. But I think the key message is to realize that you're not alone. There are a lot of organizations or people or friends, but you have to ask them also to help you, and so to be able to provide the same care as you're used to give or get. But you can't do it alone. I think that's a really important message, because I think especially women, we want to care for everyone. You know, we want to keep doing what we used to do, but when you're sick, you can't do that. So it's really hard to accept, I remember.
So pull in the resources.
Pull in the resources,
yeah.
Because, you know, every time I talk to a woman and that she doesn't want to ask help, I ask her, if your best friend is ill and she needs your help, would you go and help her? Yeah, of course, instantly. Then I said, well, why don't you ask it for yourself? Because we link it with weakness.
Yes, don't you think sometimes that people retreat into themselves?
Yeah.
And it can be quite hard to sort of ask for that help, because you're feeling vulnerable anyway. And maybe, say, for example, if you're having chemo, there may be hair loss, there'll be physical changes.
Yeah.
So it can be quite hard to bring other people into your life, I think. So your advice is reach out.
Reach out, but also to the people around such a patient or cancer survivor, is to not just look and watch and wait for them to call you. Like, for instance, the tip I always tell everywhere I go where I talk about the work that I do is, if you know someone that is going through a hard time, it can be breast cancer, it can be anything else, it can also be something positive. It's something that we forgot to do, is just send a postcard.
Yes.
It's something so simple, because, you know, when I was ill, many people told me, Yamina, I sent you messages via LinkedIn, WhatsApp, but I was too tired. You know, when I held my phone and I read one message, it was already too heavy. And all these messages, all these channels that you have.
So the old letter or postcard might be.
Yes, because you receive the card, you can put it on your table or on the wall.
So a friendly card or a funny card or whatever.
Yeah, I asked that because I'm a very social person and I really love to see people. But indeed, I was too tired, too sick. I was gaining a lot of weight. I think I put up like 20 kilos in these 5 months. I really felt bad. And I think 90% of the visits that were planned, I canceled them because I was not feeling well.
That's my point about retreating.
Yes. So then people asked me, if we cannot come to see you, what can we do to help you? And so I told them, well, send me a postcard. But I didn't know that about 150 postcards were going to arrive.
How lovely.
Yes, and I hung them on the wall, and it was my wall of happiness. And on good days, I would just look at the cards and read them. And on bad days, I just looked at them from in my couch or anything. And the fun thing, if there's a fun thing about chemo, is that you forget things. So then sometimes I would read a card and tell my sons, oh, look, this person sent a postcard. And then they looked at me and they said, Mom, you already said that twice. But it's a gift that keeps on giving.
I know.
But it was something that was really great. And because it's something tangible, you know?
Sure.
It's not like a text message and you get so many and then it's too tiring.
Do you have any tips for mums or dads in relation to children and cancer? And how did you find sort of explaining it to your children or caring for your children during this time?
Well, my children were 16 and 20 already. They found it really difficult. What was important with them is that I told it as it was. And when they heard that the doctor said, well, look, it's going to be a tough time because you're going to have chemo and radiation therapy, but after that it will be okay. For them, that was enough.
Okay.
Of course, it depends if the children are really small, but you don't have to sugarcoat it because kids know something.
They know instinctively, don't they?
Yes, they know something is going on, and if you dismiss it, it's going to make them even more anxious.
Denial.
Yes.
Yamina, finally, just to ask you about sort of work practices, getting back to work, what employers can do, what society can do for cancer survivors and patients, women and men. What's your kind of the learnings that you've had from your experience in terms of how society needs to be responding to this illness, this survival?
Yeah. Well, first of all, both the patients and the cancer survivors and the employers need to not look at the person as a sick person, because you're just a person who wants to get back to work. And I think it's important to keep in touch with each other and just know what the needs are, what the possibilities are. I always like to look at any situation from the standpoint of what are the possibilities. If it's not what it was, what can it be? And I think it's important to know what's possible for the employer, what's possible for the patient or the cancer survivor, and then try to find a match. And sometimes the conclusion is, well, it's not here. It can be something else. It can be a different job. Also, what is important to me is work can be defined in different ways. Sometimes what will help people to get back to the work place or the labor market, let's say, is maybe do some volunteering. Something that where you can do something like a few hours a week, spread over a week, and then you can feel, how does it go? How do I handle stress? How do I handle being on time? And those are things that can really help to go back to the labor market.
One of my friends got involved in rowing.
Oh,
and it was breast cancer survivors who set up a whole club.
Yeah.
And it's been a fantastic experience for her. And in a funny sort of way, what you're saying reminds me of COVID and the advice to employers, to those who are working remotely, stay in touch.
Stay in touch.
And I think that's probably a very important point
it's
you're
really
making.
important, because if you're out for like a year,
yes,
and you didn't have any contact with colleagues or your boss, it's really difficult to go back.
It is.
It is.
Well, Yamina, thank you so much for sharing your experience and being such a fantastic breast cancer survivor, having gone through a really difficult time with your illness. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's been great to hear what you've learned from the experience and how you handled it.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work you're doing. Thank you so much.